let me introduce this illustrious list of panelists. Award-winning actress Kathleen Chalfant is known for her lauded performances in Wit and Angels in America, among countless others. She recently appeared in Here There Are Blueberries on Broadway and won Best Actress, so shout out, at the 2024 Venice Film Festival for the film Familiar Touch. Patrece Lucas is a licensed mental health counselor, wellness coach, partner, mediator, caregiver, and the founder of Indigo Transitions, PLLC, a private practice. She was a Care Across Generations 2024 Care Fellow. And my friend Kristin Rowe, Finkbeiner, is a radio host, speaker, and award-winning author. She's the co-founder and executive director of one of my favorite organizations, Moms Rising. Hey. A nonprofit advocacy group with over 1 million members across the nation working to improve economic security, stopping discrimination, and building a nation where everybody can thrive. Before I jump into my first question, I feel like I should answer a question that I'm gonna ask, which is this question about my personal care story. Mm-hmm. I recently reunited with my mom after 31 years of not being together because of immigration. Yeah. So she came in February, and then after Thanksgiving, I decided to move my mom, who's 68, and then her mom, my grandmother, to my house. So the three of us, it's like the Golden Girls meets the... I think I'm Blanche. It's like the Golden Girls meets the Joy Luck Club, right? Like just the level of, and I've never been a caretaker before, so I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell them we can only go to Costco once a day. Just once a day. So I've just shared a little bit about my personal care story. I'm gonna start with you, Kathleen. Can you share a little bit about your personal care story, and how has care been a part of your life?
Well, I'm 80 years old, so I've done all the caring for children through parents and a brother. I was back there thinking about my care story and realized that you learn as you go along. So the first people that I cared for, there was a lot of intervention, and I did feel that I had to do things. And I've always thought that I actually killed my uncle. Because I kept trying to give him a life that I would have liked. It wasn't so much the life that he liked. Mm-hmm. And the last chapter of that was I found a place for him in a senior living community, and their cable television thing, this was a long time ago, it's about 20 years ago, their cable television thing didn't have sports, and Unc was a huge lover of sports, so I got him some other cable TV, the thing where you put the antenna outside and it moves all around. The only part of that Unc, who was a person, someone who came from the mechanical age, understood was that every time you pushed a button, you had to pay somebody. Mm. So my uncle lived in Ventura and I lived in New York, and I went to visit him a couple of times a month. And every time I went to visit Unc, there was just snow on the television screen. And so I really do believe that DirecTV in some way killed my uncle. He knew I was trying. So he was very patient. And then the next person that I had mostly the primary care for was my much older, glamorous gay brother, who is probably the reason I'm an actor. Mm-hmm. And my brother was diagnosed with a kind of cancer that he survived the AIDS epidemic, but a kind of cancer that was immune related, and was 85% curable and 15% fatal within a year and a half. And he was in the 15%, but he came to live with us in New York and made looking after my brother, who had been my sort of third parent, made a community that included my husband, our cousins who lived with us, my best friend's husband who loved opera as much as my brother did. And I finally learned to just be quiet with my brother, so that at the end of his life, he was in the hospital and I moved into the hospital room. They let me stay. It was St. Vincent's, which was, if anybody who's from New York knows, was a wonderful hospital that is now gone, and they just let me stay there. We had parties, brought people over, and the last night of Alan's life, I just held his hand until he went away. And I learned more from that than about anything. So, and I've been a secondary caregiver for lots and lots of people. And what I've learned from it is that in the end, all we have to offer is our presence.
My care story is like so many others, is a care wake-up call. I was raised by a single mom who was a child care worker, and I never expected to be pushed out of the labor force when I had kids. But when my son was born, he had a primary immune deficiency. It was an unplanned health emergency. And as you all know, in the United States of America, we don't yet have any paid family medical leave. And so in this unplanned health emergency, I suddenly also was jobless. And I was scared, and I was lonely, and I did what everybody does in those moments. I called the US Census. I was like, help, US Census. How many moms are there out there who are pushed out of the labor force and left out? And they gave a totally unsatisfactory answer. Their answer was, we don't know. Wow. Then they said, call the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so I did. This is what anybody does when they're lonely and scared. They call the US Census and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they said, we also don't know, but we can tell you that in the shadow of a married spouse, hello, we've just invisibilized a whole bunch of parents, that you're 7 times more likely to live in poverty if you've been pushed out of the labor force, which of course makes sense when you think about it. And so in that moment, a fire was ignited in my soul. I was like, what is happening? We're doing all of this wrong. How can we fix this? And so my care story was my spark story, and I am still on fire today.
Yeah. Okay. They didn't tell me I was up here with comedians. My story is a little different. So I became the caregiver that my family needs, specifically my mother needs. The best compliment my mom ever gave me is she said, I wish I had a counselor like you. So I became a caregiver at a very early age. I didn't know I was a caregiver. We were just taking care of mama. At 11 is probably the first time I walked into a hospital and advocated for my mom. Over the years, she's had so many different health challenges, and I was right there with her in all of them. The first time I thought my mom was dying, I was 17. She was 40. It was my senior year of college, and she didn't. She's here today. She had heart surgery, life-saving heart surgery on October 14th. One was planned, sorta, kinda, and the other one was emergency because after the heart surgery, her heart failed, and I've been her full-time caregiver ever since. I'm a mama of 2 beautiful baby dogs. My daughter will be 22 next week, and my son is 20. And when I used to travel for work and travel for many beautiful things, and I used to leave my babies home with my mama when she was in good enough health, and now I leave my mama home with my babies. So they're there. Yeah, they're there caring for grandma now, and I text them. I'm going on stage because I didn't have good connection, so I couldn't call my mom, but I was able to text the next generation, and they are gonna make sure she knows I'm on stage sharing our story. So I became a licensed mental health counselor because I wanted to provide care to my community in the ways that I know I need it. My community calls me a community counselor. In that work, I have a social advocacy program, Coffee with a Counselor, where I do this, talk about mental health and wellness. I also have a care program or group, Where Do Black Women Go to Grieve, and provide a lot of care in that space to my community. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I mean, as we all know, the need for care is universal, and that need can and does arise at every stage of life. Families themselves are intergenerational. From your perspective, now this is for all of you, why is it important to talk about care across generation and families as intergenerational? Let me actually start with Kristin, and then I'll go around.
Everybody at some point in their lives needs care or gives care to people who are younger, who are the same age, or to people who are older. And yet we have a country that is set up in a way that doesn't acknowledge, respect, or reflect that.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I like to show how many people give and receive care is, of course, motherhood. So everybody who is a mom, raise your hand. Let's give you a shout out. Now, anybody who's ever had a mom, could you raise your hand? This is caring across generations. This is power, this is us united, and yet childcare costs more than college. Elder care is too often out of reach. Paid family leave is not happening in the United States of America yet, but is in basically every other country on the actual planet Earth. And healthcare costs are expected to go up by as much as 70 to 90% in the next year. This is not okay. And often in our country, we say, okay, it's your fault that you can't make it all meet. It's your fault that you can't do the algebra equations or whatever kind of equation might make it all fit in your calendar. It's not our faults. And one of the things that we see in the beauty of this togetherness, the horror, the sadness of this togetherness, is that when this many people are having the same types of problems at the same time, we don't have an epidemic of personal failures, as it's often framed in the media. We have national structural issues that we can and must solve together. And that's why, because of you, because of us, and we saw reflected in the elections that just happened recently, it's no longer a question of if, but when we finally have universal child care, universal paid family medical leave, universal access to elder and community-based services, and hopefully universal health care at some point. So one of the things when we look at caring across generations, we see that there's a lack of structural ability to provide that care, but there's also a power of a movement across generations rising together for one another. And so I'm so excited to be here today with all of you and with the panelists, and we are building that movement, and we are change in motion. So thank you.
Yes.
Kathleen?
I think the question, there's a notion that if you need care, you, as the person who's given care, has somehow failed. And actually what care does is make all our lives possible. We understand it with babies. They haven't failed, they just can't walk yet. Or do a lot of those shop. They're not so good at shopping. For older people, and I say this as an older person, there are certain things we can't do anymore, but it doesn't mean that we are less human. The human being remains inside. I had yesterday an astonishing example of family caregiving, entirely unexpected. My husband and I are thinking of moving, and on the 5th floor of our house, there were 6 file cabinets. They're not very heavy because they were empty. And we had 10 years ago moved them up there. So we thought we could move them down. Already you see the issue. So after a half an hour of moving blankets and careful going down the stairs and holding on and like that and all like that, we had moved one down, and a miracle happened. Our son-in-law arrived. And our son-in-law carried all 5 of the rest of them downstairs in about 20 minutes. And that's a form of care, the kind of care that you give in a family immediately. And it doesn't mean that the old people have failed, or what it means is that, as Kristin said, we live across generations. We are a creature that developed from small villages. And in small villages, the scale is such that everyone helps everyone with whatever needs to be done. And I think we can reproduce those structures in our communities. And then there's one more thing, which is the odd notion that coal mining is noble labor. It's actually a form of suicide, as far as I can tell, whereas caregiving is not. And one of the things I think that we need to do in order to change our the societal structures around caregiving is to understand, as each of us does in the moment, that caregiving is noble labor, skilled, difficult, essential, important. And if we say that to each other and to the people who are our caregivers at every moment, perhaps we can change the notion of what constitutes noble labor in this society.
Absolutely.
Patrece?
Yeah, I think caregiving and care is a human experience. I think this country, socially, culturally, we've been taught that care is for them, not for me. It's something you do or give to someone else who has failed or has a need. But care is a human condition. It's a part of our humanity. And so to bring it across generations, you have to raise a generation, raise your families, your children, to know that care is necessary. And not when you need it, because it's available, right? So one of the things I do with my children and my clients alike is I create the space where they know to ask for help. Not when they're in dire straits, but the first time you need help, the first time you could receive some care and it makes your life better. I also taught them how to give help, right? I'm grateful to come from a family who did care marginally well, right? I might argue against that today, but we did care marginally well in the ways in which we could figure out how to do it. I remember my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my mother's father's mother, she lived to 104, and they would pick her up, and at that time we needed to pick her up, and she would stay a month at everyone's home in the family, or who volunteered, or who cared capacity. And I was lucky enough that she stayed in me and my mom's home because my mom was well enough at that time, and just to see that care. But I saw her at my grandmother's house, I saw her at my aunt's. And so understanding that and then translating that for my children, and now being able to leave my mom home with my children is so important. Or see my children give care, not because someone needs it, but because they can.
Now, I want us to imagine a future where intergenerational caregiving is actually the norm. You know, in this future, we uplift young people. We can afford childcare. We can embrace aging. Yes, embrace aging. Just keep moisturizing. We embrace...
There are limits to moisturizing.
Oh, are there... I wish you had not said that, but all right.
I'm just speaking to you from the other side. That's it.
Embrace all the different ways families are created and sustained by care. What does that future look and feel like to you? And what would it take to get there?
During the election we just had that might make it at least better in New York City, we had a house guest from Sweden who didn't understand the problem. So it would look like Sweden, maybe.
It would look like Sweden.
They have all of those things.
With,
paid childcare, family leave, actually education through the bachelor's degree is free, and you know.
So was this just so confusing for your guests? Was it just
well, they didn't understand why everybody didn't do that. And you'd say,
I don't
and
either.
then yes, and the argument always is, well, taxes. But I guess nobody's ever understood the difference between paying your taxes and paying for private long-term care insurance, for instance, or child care. Yeah. It's a mental problem that we have. here.
Psychological. It's a psychological.
It's a cultural problem.
It's a cultural problem, yeah.
It would look and feel like joy. It would feel like sorrow. It would feel like being human. Because we would be able to be there for our baby's first breaths and for our parents' last. We'd be able to be there when it mattered. We would be able to be there for ourselves, to be able to make ends meet through the wages that we make. And yes, care workers need to earn living wages and don't right now. It would look like living. And I think that's really important. We need time. Being able to move these policies forward, being able to build a care infrastructure is about time and choice and freedom. And as we've heard, the situation in the United States of America doesn't have to be this way. There's plenty of examples of places where they have passed these policies, and not only have families been lifted, but businesses in the economy have been lifted too. And we have rooms full of data, if anybody ever wants to fact check that one on this. And so how do we get there? We get there through movement. We get there through sharing our care story with people of all political persuasions, because it turns out that Republicans, Democrats, Independent, Libertarians, all of us care for our families.
That's right.
And when we look at the polling, people of all political backgrounds actually support these policies that we're talking about. But we have, I might add, some elected leaders who are out of step with their own constituents.
Yeah.
So it looks like persistence. And I'm really excited to share that at Moms Rising, we have over 1.2 million members. 1 in 300 people are now an active member of Moms Rising. We have an 84% increase in engagement year to year from last year to this year.
Nice.
But I'm even more excited to share that there is a care coalition of organizations, of leaders, of people coming together. Raise your hand if you're part of the care coalition. Hello, I know I see you all out there, who are fighting together across organizations, across generations, across leaders, with a leaderful movement for change. So how we get there is not one organization or one leader, but a leaderful organization, a leaderful movement, rather, just like we have in this room. So thank you for being here and being part of that leaderful movement.
Okay. In my grief work, I often talk about I don't want to grieve and struggle. I want to support my clients in not grieving and struggle, and so I've translated that to my care work. Care should not be synonymous with struggle. It should, again, it's such a part of our humanity. It's such a part of our human experience. It should just be normal. And so the future looks like care being normal, care being normalized, because we will all need care, not if, but when. Again, we talk about the littlest and youngest among us, the babies, they need care, and then our elders. But we also need care in between those parts, and it shouldn't be struggle. Care should not equal struggle. And so, the future I imagine is just care is embedded into the fabric of the social construct. We are caring people. We are caring people. Now we have to make policy that looks like we are caring people. Absolutely. We have great examples. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have great examples of that we need to look to and build on.
Now, I'm just going to go with some specific questions here. Kathleen, so you recently starred in this widely acclaimed film, Familiar Touch, and played the lead role.
Yeah.
A woman who has dementia and moves into an assisted living facility. What personal experiences did you draw upon in this role?
My best friend, Sybil Pearson, the playwright, was in her dementia journey at about the same place that the protagonist in this film was when the script came to me. So that I very much wanted to do it, not only as a tribute to Sybil, but I also knew that Sybil would teach me how to do it. And so I learned from Sybil how to play this part. And having done it, and now Sybil's moved on in this journey, she's now almost entirely nonverbal. And the movie, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but the movie is from the point of view of Ruth, so that it's not one of those movies about dementia that's about the tragedy of the family. It's about the life of the person. And what I learned from playing this part was that we live until we don't. And what I've learned with Sybil, who is now nonverbal and if you don't hold her hand, seems to be often non-responsive. But I know that Sybil's still in there. She's somewhere else. And somehow holding her hand brings her up. So if you hold her hand for a couple hours, every 10 minutes or so, she turns around and says, "Gorgeous." Or, "I love you." And while it's nice to think that my holding her hand is a gift to her, "Gorgeous" and "I love you" are the greatest gifts that another person can give to you.
Absolutely.
So that's what I learned from that movie.
Absolutely.
Kristin, so the sandwich generation often carries impossible expectations, but who cares for the caregiver in the middle? How do we shift from this kind of superhero mom narrative that depletes caregivers to modeling for our kids that care is something we all give and receive, that needing help is actually human?
It's an excellent question. How do we shift our culture? Part of how we shift our culture is our stories, sharing our stories of now, sharing our dream of the future. And right now we have too many people, not only in a sandwich generation, so caring for people who are older and caring for people who are younger, but actually stuck in a panini where we're trying to make ends meet. 3/4 of families need the wages of moms to put food on the table and a roof over their heads. That is so important. So we're stuck in this panini. And so how do we get out of the panini? Well, of course, there's legislative change, which we've been talking about. There's also narrative change, cultural change, and then there's movement growth. And people sometimes underestimate the power of their story to move legislative change, to build a movement, to build overall change, and to get out of the panini and to get into a place where I am not going to have to be superhuman all by myself. But our stories do a couple of really important things. One, we have a Give a Clue project with elected leaders who don't yet have political parity in terms of representation in our United States Capitol. So many of them haven't experienced the panini themselves. So sharing our story is a Give a Clue project to elected leaders to help them make that policy that we all need to reflect and respect us. Similarly, a lot of reporters haven't yet experienced the panini themselves either. So sharing our stories helps there be more accurate reporting, helps do cultural change, and then sharing your story on social media, you're your own media outlet, so you can do there too. But importantly, and to the question, sharing our stories also helps everybody know they're not alone, that they can say this is too much. They can say, I don't actually have 29 hours in every 24-hour day. They can say, I don't actually have unlimited funds to deal with this care infrastructure, which is prohibitively expensive. And so that builds a movement. And so when we share our stories, when we engage, when we persist, when we insist, that's how we get out of the panini. I wish it was an overnight thing where you could just put a light switch on and then it just happened. But I can tell you that from when I first started this work, and nobody, well, some of you were talking about it, thank you very much, but hardly any of the public was talking about these, to having candidates run on these issues. Right here in New York City, we just had the mayor have one of his top 3 issues be childcare. We have seen big narrative change, and a lot of that is due to me, you, and us sharing our stories. So we're getting out of the panini together.
Yeah.
I just actually have to say, by the way, it was pretty stunning as a journalist, watching that campaign, how disciplined Mamdani was about that issue.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of the few times I was like, all right, he's gonna keep repeating this, right, until everybody understands that this is not just a concern for parents, it's a concern for everyone.
Yes.
Right? And I thought that was really well done in that way.
Not only was it well done, the beautiful thing about it is when asked why childcare, the answer was people's stories at the doors. I was knocking on doors and people over and over again said that this is an impossible thing for me to do alone. We need childcare. And that is an example of how your stories, our stories are powerful. And before we close with this question, can we give a little round of applause to all the people who can now say, I told you so, from raising these issues decades ago who are in this room. So thank you to everybody in this room.
You're right. This is decades in the making. This did not happen overnight.
Yeah.
So, Patrece, you've spoken beautifully about falling in love with community care while caring for your parents from a young age, how it transformed an isolating experience into something collective and healing. Our society has taught us that caregiving is a future issue, something that happens down the road in crisis, rather than as a natural part of how communities support each other across all ages. As someone who became a caregiver earlier and who is now adult children starting to think about these questions, what would it look like to actually prepare younger generations differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would look like taking field trips to care facilities.
That's
instead of the zoo.
Yeah.
Release the animals, by the way, but taking children to care facilities, right? Bringing care back into the home in ways that it feels empowering for family members to be providers of care for the younger generation. I'm so grateful that even with my mom's debilitating health over the years, she came in and out of health. She was a caregiver for my children, my nieces and my nephews, so many people in the community. And so my children, they had care modeled for them. I had care modeled for me. And so I grew up to be a caregiver, not just because we all are caregivers, but grew up to be a caregiver that wanted to care for my community. They call me the community counselor in Detroit. I'm one of many, but because I'm in the community providing care. Yeah.
So just to follow up, how do we help them see themselves as already kind of a part of this care ecosystem? Not future victims of a care crisis, so that's narrative change already, but active participants in community care like right now.
Right now, those are the field trips to the care facilities. And showing them how to care, normalizing care, not something we have to do, but something that we want to do. And making it, again, I'm repeating myself as well, making it a part of our lives, part of the fabric of our lives. It shouldn't be this isolated thing that we're caring for grandma or grandpa over here. This is something separate from our everyday lives. And again, yes, legislation, policy change, movements have to make that happen. But we start those in our own homes. How do you, I encourage all of you, how will you make care and normalize care? And I know I'm talking to a beautiful audience that's already doing that. But how do you do that? And that's with your storytelling, that's with your vote, and not just the vote you cast, but the vote you spend often as well. Yeah, we normalize it.
I just have to say, by the way, I don't know about you, but I got up this morning way too early, and of course, went on the doom scroll of what's happening in Charlotte and what's happening in so many places in our country right now, and how careless everything seems out of this government. And to sit here amongst all of you, having this meticulously emotional conversation about care feels entirely coherent. So thank you for adding coherence to what feels like such an incoherent time. One thing I've learned is caregiving actually feels like care getting.
Yes.
I feel like I'm getting something out of it. Like,
Gorgeous.
I love
so
it.
thank you to all of you.
Yes.
We've got to wrap this up. Can we please give a round of applause?